Good morning. You can do better than that. Good morning. As we say in Hawaii, aloha. I was born and raised in Hawaii, and it's indeed a privilege to be able to be here today. I want to thank everyone for allowing me to be here. And I guess in Japanese, in Buddhism, we call it the goen. Goen means the karmic and causes and conditions that bring us to this very moment in our lives. So everything is based upon causes and conditions. Just as I was meant to be here, you are meant to be here. And we're very grateful to come to this wonderful place to be able to share these thoughts together. But before I begin, I would like to ask everyone to partake of a moment of silence or meditation, reflection. And I'll ring the bell to start, and I'll close the meditation with a bell as well. It's just about a minute or two. Let us pause. Namo tassa bhagavato, arahato, sammasambuddhassa. Homage to him, the exalted one, the enlightened one, the supremely awakened one. Again, good morning, and thank you for this wonderful opportunity of sharing. As I was introducing myself and meeting some of you, I realized that at least 3 people are first-timers, with me 4. And I get it's really a wonderful privilege, and I often reflect upon, again, the causes and conditions that brought us together today. As you noticed, the subject or the title of my talk today is called What's Going On? Actually, I had another title, but profanity does not allow me to say that. But I'm not sure about you, but recently, a lot of things have been bothering me. How about you? What's going on in our lives, in our community, our nation, the world? What's going on? For some reason, things have become a little bit more complicated. And I think we're all seeking some kind of a clarity or some kind of direction so we can continue on in our lives. And I think this is very important. So what I'd like to talk about is how do we resolve something like this from the Buddhist perspective? And every school of Buddhism has their so-called interpretation of why the Buddha appeared in this world, and perhaps what the Buddha is trying to say. And our school is no exception. I'd like to begin with very, very basic Buddhism. And if you've been studying something about Buddhism and studying under a great teacher like Pamela, I think the first sermon that Shakyamuni delivered, or the first talk he gave, was often or is often referred to as the turning of the wheel. Prior to Shakyamuni, the historical Buddha, becoming enlightened, he diligently studied how to become free. And it is written in many texts that he went through many ups and downs, even to the point where he tortured his body, thinking that this is the way to find spiritual freedom, to be free from samsara, the ups and downs, the sorrows of life itself. In one of his stories, he had meditated for a very long time, to the point that he became almost skin and bones. And as he awoke from his meditation, a woman who was, taking care of cattle or something, offered him a bowl of milk. And Shakyamuni, still a disciple, not the Buddha, reverently took it and drank it. He was also studying with a group of fellow practitioners, and when they saw that, they said, Shakyamuni went off the cliff there. You know that we're not supposed to, even speak to a woman. And here you go accepting milk from a woman. Something is wrong with you. We can't believe you. We can't follow you. So they said, you know what, we give up on you. And so they left. It was after that Shakyamuni had, nourished his body back. And he said, I will not awaken from my spiritual meditation unless I find a way. So for 49 days, he sat down in deep meditation, and that's why we often refer to it as the 49 days. And during those 49 days, he went through many ups and downs, many personal sufferings, trying to discover for himself what is the truth. And on the morning of the 49th day, as it is written, as the morning sun was arising, he touched the ground with his finger. And then he was then supposedly enlightened. Enlightenment is a word that we give to someone who's free of spiritual or so attachments. But to the best of my knowledge, Shakyamuni never said, I'm enlightened, gang. I'm the Buddha, gang. You need to follow me, gang. I think of nothing that I know of. Maybe other schools may have an interpretation. But he just said, I want to be me. And as he rose from his seat and started walking around, he happened to come across his fellow disciples who had abandoned him. And they looked at him and said, something's different about you. Something's different about you. And he said, no, I'm still the same. No, there's something different about you. What is it? What is it? Tell us. What makes you so different? Why are your energies so different? And Shakyamuni contemplated for a moment and said, well, if you think I am different, then maybe I can share you what I was contemplating during those 49 days. And his so-called first delivery or message is often referred to as the Four Noble Truths. Is anyone here familiar with the Four Noble Truths? Anybody? Okay, you can raise your hand high. You're not going to be fined for anything, okay? Anybody? There we go. So what's the first one? Anybody knows? There are four truths. First is often referred to as suffering, the cause of suffering, or the recognition of suffering. And he said, perhaps the greatest suffering that we have is being real to ourselves. I'm trying to translate this into today's language. It means being acceptance of who and what you are. And how many of us try to be somebody else except ourselves? Anybody here who's guilty of that? Yeah? I want to be like that. I want to be like that. Or that person. And quite often that person is saying, I want to be like you. Yeah? So Shakyamuni, all he's saying is that I found reality in being myself. But I had to recognize different things. And one of them is that the suffering is not the suffering of others, because people can feel, when you pinch yourself, who's feeling the pain? Is it yourself or somebody else? It's yourself. The suffering is caused by myself. And what causes my suffering? I'm so attached to different things that I'm not able to, separate myself from that. And what is the cause of suffering? Anybody knows? There are many possible reasons, but what is one of them? Don't be afraid, you can answer again, okay? Maybe I'll give you a lollipop afterwards. Attachments, exactly. But where do these attachments come from? Is it an outside source, from inside source? Often referred to or pinpointed as being our ego. So the cause of suffering is my own attachment. It is caused by my ego. And the second one was that, well, the first being, there is something called the recognition of something called suffering. And the second, we jumped actually, was the cause of it was my own ego. What was the third one? Anybody? Grand prize, anybody? No? Yes? Oh, I'm sorry, you have to speak a little louder. I'm kind of... Okay, that's the goal. But the third is, if you think that I'm different from you, there is a possibility, or we often call it a cessation of suffering. And the big one, what's the fourth one, anybody? The practice. What is the practice? Often referred to as the Eightfold Path. And although it's been translated as right thought, right speech, right different things, I tend to have a difficulty accepting the fact that it's right. And in my language, in my vocabulary, instead of saying right, because quickly people say, well, there's a wrong then. Yes, but I tend to use the phrase or the terminology of appropriate. Appropriate language, appropriate speech, appropriate thoughts. Why? Because every situation is different. The conditions here in New York City are definitely different from where I come from in the country in Hawaii. It is probably different from any place else in the world. And I became aware of this, I guess, when you guys were, for those who went through 9/11. My son woke me up early in the morning because there's a 6-hour difference between New York and Hawaii. And the phone rang early in the morning, and he said, Dad, are you looking at the news? I said, who wants to look at the news at 5 o'clock in the morning? No, Dad, you need to look at it. So I looked up and I thought, wow, this is a fantastic sci-fi, but it wasn't a sci-fi, it was for real. And throughout the day, for those who are here, we remember that the news was repeating the same thing over and over again. But in one segment of the day, it showed what was going on in a certain area of the Middle East. And while the rest of the world was mourning this great tragedy, what were they doing? Celebrating. And so it dawned on me that rather than right, what is appropriate? So I tend to use the word appropriate over right. And Shakyamuni said, these are the things, these 8 things that have helped me to understand what life is about, but more importantly, the source of life is myself. And I think, as I was speaking to Pamela this morning, there are many pictures and perhaps carvings of Shakyamuni sitting down, but the most inspirational for me is when he sat down and touched the ground. And that's so important for me because perhaps, although not spoken at the moment, Shakyamuni was saying, we're all together, we're all connected in some way. There is no difference between you and me. And perhaps this message meant that if you think I'm different, you can be the same thing too. I'm not special from you. And so as I'm looking at what's going on and what's going in our world, I think we all have issues answering and contemplating this question. But I like to think that it's a we movement as opposed to a you and a me thing. That if we see something as being not correct or needs to be adjusted, whose responsibility is it to make it appropriate? Anybody? Simple. It's our responsibility. And yet, how many of us have the courage to step forward and make things better? Anybody here? If you do, put your hand on your shoulder and pat yourself, okay? Because it takes a lot of guts and courage to be able to do that. Instead, what do? I'll leave it up to somebody else to take care of it. It's not my problem. It doesn't affect me at all. We leave it up to somebody else. And it's easier for all of us to grumble about it after the fact rather than take responsibility for it. So going back to that question again, what's going on? How do we resolve it? And I'm not necessarily talking about world issues. I'm not talking about national issues. Is there any family here can honestly say, we have no issues in our family. It begins with what? With me. It begins with us. And it takes that much effort, me, us, we, to resolve certain things. In this point in our lives, I think it's important for each and every one of us to wake up to this fact, to this truth, and say, if I want things to be better, what am I supposed to do? Take responsibility. If Shakyamuni was a great teacher that used his life to express that, then perhaps he is the model or an example of what we can do and perhaps what the outcome will be. I wanted to tell you a story about, as a minister in Hawaii, we have, I guess you call it a rosary. Some of them are like this, some of them are smaller. And in our temple in Hawaii, we have these on the wall. So in case you come to temple and you need to borrow one, help yourself. And it's common practice for when we have memorial services that we deliver a message. As I was about to deliver my message or start the service, I saw two small children going over and they were touching the beads and everything else. And at that time, some of you may remember power beads were in fashion. Yeah? And so looking at it, and I thought, oh, okay. And they're looking at me, and I said, well, these are called ninju. And if you'd like to borrow them, you're more than welcome to use them in the service. And they looked at me, and they both took one and they sat down. And before I delivered my message, I asked, are there any questions you'd like to ask? And the little, I'm assuming he was the brother, kept on nodding to the sister and saying, as if to ask a question. And I asked again, if there are any questions you'd like to ask or any things that need to be clarified, by all means, please ask. So the little girl finally raised her hand. And in Japanese, a teacher or a minister is often referred to as sensei. So she said, sensei, and I said, yes. And she pointed at her ninju, as if to say, what are these again? So I said to the little girl, explain to everyone, these are called reflection beads. And Shakyamuni had said, there are several hundred, faults of man, of which 108 are the most, crucial, the ones that we have to, we refer to. So we carry them in our left hand as a reminder of our faults. Then she said, then she looked at me again and said, sensei, I said, yes. Does it mean that faults, how naughty we can be? Oh, okay, if you take it as your interpretation of, faults, I said, I guess so. Then she looked at hers and she looked at mine and said, sensei, I think you're more naughty than me. And as pure, as simple as it may have been, it's a great awakening to myself. More so because I'm given the privilege of wearing a robe of my responsibility, not only as a so-called teacher, but more importantly as a human being, that we're all together in the same boat and we're all together in a family. So coming back to the concept of we're all in it together, and if we think of ourselves as being part of a universal family like what you represent, how do you treat family? How do you treat family? Anybody? Would you be, mean to a family? Or you try, we have ups and downs, but would you openly try to be mean to somebody? Or would you try to be a little bit more understanding? Think about it. This is what we're all about, a universal family. What's going on? It's we, ourselves, taking responsibility for who and what we are. And collectively, as a group, as a family, hopefully lead all into a better direction. So we come today to reflect upon some of the teachings of our tradition, which is very similar to yours, and say we're all part of a universal family. So put down the barriers. There is no need for barriers. Look at each other as being a loving brother, a loving sister, mother, auntie, uncle, whatever makes you feel connected, and say, thank you for being there. Thank you for being a pillar. How grateful I am for this opportunity. Rare it is to receive human life. Now we're living in it. More difficult it is to be able to hear the words of the Blessed One. How truly grateful we have the opportunity to not only hear, but to receive. Thank you. Thank you. Namo Amida Butsu.